Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We got a brand new story to share with you. Let's dive in. My name's Damien, and I'll tell you how one simple ultimatum ended my 4-year relationship. When my fiancée looked me dead in the eye and said, "It's either me or them," she thought she knew exactly how I'd respond. For years, I'd always chosen her way, keeping the peace and avoiding conflict. But this time I didn't bend, and my response completely caught her off guard. But before you jump to conclusions, let me walk you through everything so it all makes sense. I first met Liliana at a friend's casual gathering on a weekend. She came in with a group of girls I hadn't met before, and they were all stunning, which immediately caught my attention. As the event picked up, someone suggested we play some games to break the ice. By chance, Liliana and I got paired up. We weren't the best team, but we weren't terrible either. We won a few games, lost some, but what stood out was how well we worked together. It felt effortless, like two people who had known each other longer than just a few hours. At the end of the night, I asked for her number to keep in touch, and she gave it to me without hesitation. For the first few weeks, we texted casually. There wasn't much romantic tension at the beginning, but somewhere along the way, things changed. One day we were just friends, and the next we were exploring something more. We spent more time together, and before I knew it, we were officially dating, and it felt right. The chemistry was undeniable. At the time, I didn't realize that just because something starts smoothly doesn't mean the road ahead will be the same. Looking back now, I can see how the romance clouded my judgment. I put her on a pedestal and ignored any signs that didn't fit into the perfect picture I had in my mind. There were red flags early on that I chose to ignore, times when she'd get upset if I disagreed with her or give me the silent treatment over small things. But I brushed it off, telling myself that was just how she was, or that she was just passionate. It's crazy how love can blind you to things that should make you question the relationship. I kept making excuses for her behavior, telling myself these were just personality quirks. As time went on, I started to notice a pattern. Liliana's love always came with conditions, though they were never clearly spoken. When I agreed with her or followed her lead, she was warm, sweet, and affectionate. But when I disagreed or suggested an alternative, it was like a switch flipped. She'd become distant, cold, and sometimes act like I wasn't even there. Other times, she'd make sarcastic comments or guilt-trip me, making me second-guess myself. I didn't realize it then, but I was conditioning myself to avoid conflict. I convinced myself it wasn't worth the argument, and that I should just go along to keep the peace. Little by little, I stopped speaking up and started agreeing with things I didn't feel right about, just to avoid another emotional standoff. I told myself I was being understanding, that compromise was part of love. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was walking on eggshells. The more I did it, the more control she had over me. Though it was disguised as love, control wrapped in kisses and "I love you, S," and "I just want what's best for us." You don't see it until you're deep in it, wondering when you stop being honest with yourself. And that's where I found myself. On the surface, everything seemed fine. Liliana and I both had professional careers. She worked in healthcare administration, and I held a corporate job in operations. But the weekends were when I truly felt alive. Saturday mornings became my reset button. I co-hosted a podcast with two of my closest friends. What started as a casual idea turned into something I actually looked forward to every week. We weren't pulling huge numbers, but the podcast was growing. And more importantly, it gave me an outlet to create, to speak freely, to laugh, and to connect with others. It was therapy without the cost. Liliana, however, never liked the podcast. At first, I thought nothing of it. She'd roll her eyes when I brought it up or say she was too tired to listen. She'd act disinterested, but when she did listen, she'd smile and nod at certain points, though I could tell her attention wasn't really there. I assumed it was just a difference in hobbies. No big deal, right? But soon, her disinterest turned into something else. Every time I mentioned the podcast crew, especially my two co-hosts, she'd tighten up. If I asked her to join one of our group hangouts, she'd ask who else was coming. The moment she found out either of them was going to be there, she'd back out, saying, "I think I'll sit this one out." At first, I thought it was just a personality clash. Not everyone clicks, right? But then I started noticing more patterns. Every time I hung out with the guys, she'd be cold afterward. If I texted her while I was with them, her replies would be short or she wouldn't respond at all. When I came home, she'd ask questions like, "So what did you guys talk about?" Like she would try to figure out if they'd said something she didn't like or something she didn't want me to hear. But when I canceled plans with the guys or didn't mention them, she'd suddenly be all smiles, playful and happy. It was like a switch flipped and everything would be sweet again. Slowly, I began to realize it wasn't about the podcast at all. It was about control. She didn't like my friends because she saw them as a threat. They knew me before her, they challenged me, and they gave me perspective she couldn't control. She wanted to isolate me from them because she didn't want the version of me that was confident, independent, and willing to think for myself. She wanted compliance, quiet agreement, a version of me that was just hers. It took me a while to see it, but once I did, everything clicked. The podcast, which had started as a fun hobby, became the last thing she couldn't control, and it became a problem for her. As the podcast grew, we started getting more listeners, some shout-outs, and even interest from sponsors. For the first time in a long time, I felt creatively alive. Naturally, I was excited. I shared every milestone with Liliana, coming home buzzing from a good recording session or a new listener milestone. But instead of support, I got cold, indifferent responses. She stopped pretending. The words came out sharp and direct. "You talk more with your podcast crew than you do with me." And "How many people are actually listening anyway?" The one that stung the most, though. "Do you really need to spend every Saturday with them?" It felt like she was slowly trying to take something I loved and reduce it to nothing. Her resentment was no longer subtle, and that's when I started pulling away emotionally. I stopped sharing updates with her because her reactions drained the joy out of it. What was the point of talking to someone who only tried to make me feel small for caring about something? That emotional distance didn't fix anything. It only turned our conversations into battlegrounds. Every word carefully chosen. Every moment a landmine. One day, in the middle of yet another exhausting argument, she asked me to cut back on my podcast time, trying to frame it as a compromise, as if she was asking for connection. But I knew the truth. I didn't try to explain myself. Instead, I looked her straight in the eye and told her, "The podcast is the one thing that makes me feel alive outside of work. I'm not giving it up just because you don't like who I'm around." Her eyes told me everything. She was used to me bending. But this time, I didn't. From that point on, things spiraled. We were engaged, wedding plans in motion, but instead of bringing us closer, it exposed all the cracks we had been ignoring. Arguments became more frequent. The smallest decisions became huge confrontations. Then, during one of those heated exchanges, she exploded. "Pick one. It's either me or them. You choose." She said it as if she was sure I'd crumble like I always did. As if she was confident I would pick her, but I didn't. Calm as anything, I told her, "I'm not quitting the one thing that gives me life just to keep the peace." That's when she took off the ring, said I'd never see her again. I didn't chase her. A week passed, no texts, no calls. Then she reached out, full of guilt. Her message was clear. My friends had turned me against her. She claimed I chose them over us, that I must have never loved her if I could let a 4-year relationship end so easily. I just sat there, stunned, not because I believed any of it, but because I couldn't believe how far off her perspective was. It was like we were living in two separate realities. To her, I had betrayed her by setting boundaries. To me, I had finally stood up for myself. I didn't argue. I just ended the call before I said something I might regret. That conversation pushed me into a period of deep reflection. I started replaying moments I brushed off and realized how slowly love had turned into submission. It made sense that some people want love that obeys, but I wanted love that understood. A few months later, she reached out again. She said she'd been working on herself, that she saw where things had gone wrong, and that she missed me. She claimed she had changed. I won't lie, hearing that stirred something in me. I didn't jump back in, but I agreed to talk. I gave it time, gave her a chance. At first, it seemed better. She listened more. For a moment, I thought maybe we could rewrite our story. But gradually, the same patterns crept back in, The subtle guilt when I chose a podcast over spending a weekend with her. The questions that seemed like concern but felt more like control. This time, I saw it for what it was. I didn't wait for it to grow again. I ended it early. Here's the thing I've learned. Sometimes you need the wrong kind of love twice to finally get it right. To finally realize that love isn't supposed to feel like performance. It should feel like freedom. And once you experience that kind of peace, you can never go back to walking on eggshells and calling it romance. Looking back, I learned some hard lessons, ones I wish someone had spelled out for me earlier. First, never tolerate emotion neglect just because you love someone. Love isn't supposed to drain you or make you question your worth every time you try to express yourself. In my case, I thought being a good partner meant avoiding arguments, letting things slide. But what I was doing was shrinking myself to keep her comfortable. When you lose your voice in your own relationship, that's not love. That's something else entirely. Second, watch the patterns, not just apologies. Anyone can say sorry after they've blown up. Anyone can promise change. But the truth is in what they do consistently, not what they say once in a while. I was so caught up in the idea of love, I wanted that I ignored the reality in front of me. An apology without changed behavior is just manipulation dressed up as remorse. And finally, when someone shows you how they really feel about you, believe them. Don't keep hoping they'll turn into the person you've made up in your head. She showed me over and over again that what she wanted wasn't a partner, but a follower. The moment I stepped outside that role, even just a little, everything changed. If love starts to feel like a prize you have to win, instead of a place you can rest, that's not love. That's control. So let me ask you this. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? If someone you'd spent 4 years with looked you in the eye and told you, it's either me or the thing that makes you feel alive, what would you choose? I'm not saying it's easy, but it's necessary. If any part of the story hit home for you, if it reminded you of something you've experienced or someone you care about, do me a favor. Like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this right now. Because sometimes all it takes is knowing that you're not crazy, that your feelings are valid, and that you deserve better to finally walk away. Thanks for sticking with